Over the last 150 years, the American government has stolen real money from its own citizens exactly 3 times. They didn't do it with guns, and they didn't do it with taxes. They did it by rewriting the definition of money itself. First, they erased the word silver from the law to destroy your independence. Then, they forced you to sell your metal to the state at half price under the threat of prison. And finally, they removed silver from the coins completely, replacing it with cheap copper scraps. Each time, they called it reform. In reality, it was pure robbery. They turned metal into paper, and then they turned paper into debt. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but the dollar is money. No, it isn't. It's a token. In 1900, if you dropped a silver dollar on a marble counter, it rang with a pure, high-pitched note. A banker could tell it was real with his eyes closed. Today, if you drop a quarter, it sounds like a tin can. That sound is the sound of your wealth being hollowed out. Back in the 19th century, silver was the money of the people. Gold belonged to the bankers and the elites in New York, but silver belonged to the farmers, the miners, and the workers. It was mined right here in Nevada and Colorado. It couldn't be controlled by the central banks. And that was the problem. The elites realized that as long as the people had silver, they had independence. So they decided to kill it. They launched a 100-year war to strip you of real assets and leave you holding paper promises. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how they pulled off the 3 greatest heists in American history, why 99% of people didn't even notice until it was too late, and why the money in your pocket right now is actually a debt note designed to lose value. But it all started with a boring piece of legislation that nobody read, until the damage was done. The first theft happened so quietly that most people didn't even realize they had been robbed until years later. It was February 12, 1873. Washington, D.C. was buzzing with lobbyists. Congress passed a law called the Coinage Act of 1873. On the surface, it looked like 67 pages of boring, bureaucratic text about minting standards and coin weights. Most congressmen didn't even read it. But buried deep in Section 14, the bankers had planted a poison pill. With a single sentence, they removed the standard silver dollar from the list of official coins. Stop and think about what that means. Before this law, any miner could walk into a U.S. mint with raw silver ore, pay a tiny fee, and have it struck into legal tender dollars. It was money created by labor, not by debt. It gave the common man, the farmer, the miner, the worker, total independence from the banks. But the moment President Ulysses S. Grant signed that act, silver stopped being money and started being just a commodity. It was demoted to scrap metal. This was a catastrophe for the working class. Suddenly, there was less money in circulation. Prices for crops collapsed. Farmers couldn't pay their debts because they had borrowed in silver, but now had to pay back in gold, a metal controlled almost entirely by the Eastern banking elites. This wasn't an accident. It was a foreclosure strategy. By making money scarce, the banks made every debt harder to pay, allowing them to buy up farms and land for pennies on the dollar. When the public finally realized what had happened, they called it the Crime of '73. It sparked protests and political movements, but the damage was done. The elite had successfully severed the link between the people's labor and the nation's money. This is the kind of financial engineering the history books usually skip. They want you to think inflation and deflation are natural weather patterns. They aren't. They are man-made weapons. We are building a community here that isn't afraid to look at the blueprints. We are racing to hit 1,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2025. If we hit that goal, I am going to release a killer video, a script that exposes the modern version of this crime happening right now with digital central bank currencies. I am honestly afraid to upload it, but if we have 1,000 insiders watching my back, I will take the risk. So if you want the truth about the future of money, hit that subscribe button right now. Now, fast forward 60 years to the second theft, where the government didn't just ban the coin, they came for your stash. Fast forward 60 years. America has survived the Great Depression, but the government is broke. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt had already confiscated the people's gold, forcing them to turn it in under threat of prison. Now, he came for the silver. On June 19, 1934, he signed the Silver Purchase Act. The newspapers called it a patriotic move to stabilize the economy. They told citizens it was their duty to help the government get back on its feet. Banks hung posters in their lobbies. "Sell your silver, save America." It sounded noble. It sounded like a rescue mission. But it was actually a trap. A month later, FDR signed Executive Order 6814. This order didn't ask nicely. It demanded the immediate surrender of all silver bullion in the United States to the Treasury. The government offered to pay 50 cents an ounce. That sounds fair, right? The market price was only 45 cents at the time. But here is the scam. The government knew the price was about to skyrocket because they were the ones buying it all up. By the end of the year, the global price of silver had jumped to 64 cents. The people who patriotically sold their savings for 50 cents realized they had been swindled out of 28% of their profit. This theft targeted the middle class. The small business owners, the silversmiths, the jewelers, and the dentists who held silver as raw material for their trade. They were given 30 days to hand over their livelihood or face federal prison. Thousands of family businesses collapsed because they couldn't get the metal they needed to work. The government accumulated 40,000 tons of silver, more than was mined in the entire world for 2 years. They stripped the real assets from the private sector and replaced them with silver certificates, paper bills that promised to pay you back in silver later. Spoiler alert, they broke that promise too. This was the second theft, confiscation through bureaucracy. But the third theft? That was the most cynical of all, because they looked you in the eye and lied about it on national television. By the 1960s, the government faced a math problem they couldn't solve. The price of silver was rising on the global market because industry needed it for everything from photography to electronics. But the government was still minting coins that were 90% pure silver. This created a glitch. The metal inside the coin was becoming worth more than the face value of the coin itself. If the price of silver hit $1.29 an ounce, you could melt down a silver dollar and sell the puddle of metal for a profit. The Treasury knew that if this happened, the entire US cash supply would vanish into smelting pots overnight. So, on July 23, 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Coinage Act of 1965. This law removed silver from dimes and quarters entirely, replacing it with a cheap copper-nickel sandwich. But it wasn't the removal that was the crime. It was the lie that came with it. Standing at the podium, Johnson looked directly into the camera and said, "The present silver coins will very definitely not disappear and will not become a rarity." He promised the American people that the new, cheap coins would circulate side by side with the old silver ones forever. He was lying, and he knew it. Or he was economically illiterate. Either way, the result was the same. Gresham's law, an economic principle that says bad money drives out good money, kicked in immediately. The moment people realized the new coins were made of copper scraps, they hoarded the silver ones. Within 3 years, silver coins had completely vanished from circulation. They didn't disappear because they were worthless. They disappeared because they were too valuable to spend. The government had successfully swapped the people's real money for tokens. And most people didn't even notice the switch until they tried to spend a dime and it didn't ring true. This was the final theft. They didn't come to your house to take the silver. They just stopped putting it in your pocket. Here is the math that broke the system. A silver dollar contained roughly 0.77 ounces of pure silver. As long as the price of silver stayed below $1.29 an ounce, the metal inside the coin was worth less than the dollar itself. It made sense to spend it. But the moment the global price broke that $1.29 barrier, the intrinsic value, the metal, became higher than the face value, the number on the coin. Imagine if you had a $1 bill in your pocket, but you could melt it down and sell the paper pulp for $1.50. What would you do? You wouldn't spend it at the store. You would hoard it, melt it, and sell it for a 50% risk-free profit. This is exactly what happened. Despite Johnson's promises, collectors, investors, and even regular citizens started pulling silver coins out of circulation by the bucket load. They threw the new copper-nickel coins back into the economy and kept the silver ones in safes. This is called Gresham's Law. Bad money drives out good money. Within just 3 years, you couldn't find a silver quarter in change anywhere in America. They were gone, melted into bars, and sold back to industry. The American people, realizing they were being scammed, engaged in a silent, massive act of rebellion. They privatized the silver supply before the government could debase it further. This leads us to a fundamental question about what money actually is. For 5,000 years, money was a physical commodity: gold, silver, salt. Today, it is a digital entry on a server. So, I want to know where you stand. Do you believe silver is still real money because it has intrinsic value and no counterparty risk? Or is it just a metal, an outdated relic that we don't need anymore? Go to the comments right now and type money or metal. I suspect the answer depends on whether you trust the government to keep its promises. Because once the silver was gone, the only thing backing the dollar was faith. And we all know how fragile that can be. So, what was the result of these 3 thefts? Who won and who lost? The numbers are devastating. In 1873, an ounce of silver cost about $1.30. Today, it costs around $30. That is a 23x increase in price. But that isn't really true. Silver didn't get more expensive. The dollar just became worthless. Over that same 150-year period, the US dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power. Let's make this concrete. Imagine a farmer in 1920. He takes his life savings, 10,000 silver dollars, and hides them under his mattress. Today, that hoard of silver would be worth roughly $230,000. He could retire on it. Now, imagine his neighbor. He trusts the government. He takes his 10,000 silver dollars, exchanges them for paper money, and hides the paper under his mattress. Today, that paper is worth $10,000. But thanks to inflation, that $10,000 has the purchasing power of about $300 in 1920 money. He lost everything. He didn't lose it to a thief or a fire. He lost it to the slow, silent theft of inflation. This is the wealth transfer. By demonetizing silver, the government forced the population to store their wealth in a currency that the government can print for free. Every time they print $1 trillion, they are diluting the value of the dollars in your pocket. It is a hidden tax that you never voted for and can't vote against. The people who held onto the metal preserved their purchasing power. The people who held onto the paper funded the government's debt with their own poverty. And this brings us to the final, terrifying realization. The theft isn't over. It has just changed forms. Today, the government doesn't need to knock on your door to take your wealth. They just click a button. In 2020, they printed $3 trillion. In 2021, another $2 trillion. The US national debt is now over $38 trillion, more than the value of all the gold and silver ever mined in human history. They have replaced money with debt. The average American owes $145,000 before they even get out of bed in the morning. This is the final stage of the theft. By removing the anchor of silver and gold, they gave themselves the power to print infinite money, which means they gave themselves the power to tax you infinitely through inflation. The crime of 73, the confiscation of 34, and the lie of 65 weren't accidents. They were stepping stones. They were the deliberate moves in a long game to transfer the wealth of the nation from the people who work for it to the people who print it. You can't get your silver back from the treasury. That metal is gone. But you can learn the lesson they tried to hide. This brings us back to our mission. We are digging up the financial history they erased. And we have a goal. We are racing to hit 1,000 subscribers by December 31st, 2025. If we hit that number, I am going to release the killer video. This is the script I have already written that exposes the next phase of this theft, the digital currency system they are building to replace the dollar entirely. I am genuinely afraid to upload it because it attacks the very architecture of the banking system. But if we hit 1,000 insiders, I will take the risk. Before I let you go, I want to say something directly to you. Just you and me. I know hearing about all this theft can make you feel angry. It should. Realizing that the money in your pocket is a lie, designed to lose value, is a hard pill to swallow. It makes you feel like the game is rigged against you. And the truth is, it is. The game is rigged. But here is the secret they don't want you to know. You don't have to play their game. When you understand history, you stop trusting their paper promises. You start looking for real value. Whether it's silver, gold, land, or skills, you start building a fortress that inflation can't touch. That is why I started this channel. Not to make you angry, but to make you smart. We are going to uncover every trick they use, one video at a time. Because the only way to win a rigged game is to stop playing by their rules and start playing by your own. So, if you are with me, if you want to take back your financial independence, hit that subscribe button. Let's build something real. Class dismissed.